I'm Dr. Julie Pham, founder of Curiosity Based. We help people practice curiosity in the world, starting in the workplace, because that is where we spend most of our waking hours. Curiosity as a practice boils down to self-awareness, relationship building, and clear communication. So join us as we interview leaders to see how they use curiosity at work.
Hi, welcome to the Curiosity at Work podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Pham, and I'm looking forward to my conversation today with Viggo Forde, who is the Chief Information Officer for Snohomish County, which is the third largest county in Washington state. Viggo also has a long career in the private sector tech, and he's also the honorary consul for Norway for Washington, Montana, Oregon, and Idaho. I've never had an honorary consul on the podcast before. Welcome, Viggo.
Thank you, Julie. Glad to be here.
I'm interested in learning about your insights on how curiosity functions in information technology at the county level. But first, I want to ask you a personal question. Viggo, can you share one example, one person who has influenced how you think about practicing curiosity at work?
Yeah, this was actually a very easy answer for me to address. So as a young engineer right out of college, I had a supervisor I worked at the Boeing company at the time. And I guess she must have figured out pretty quick that I didn't like to be bored. I didn't like to the pace at Boeing back in the 80s, it wasn't super fast and things moved at its own pace, but I always wanted to do more. And she had this amazing network within the company. She'd been there for a long time, and she was a door opener. She encouraged me to be, if you're bored, go visit with the engineering team over in payloads, or let me introduce you to the chief engineer in avionics, and so on. And she was such an enabler and so comfortable reaching out on my behalf to make introductions where it wouldn't be appropriate for me as a young engineer to reach out to a chief engineer, for example, right? And so that experience taught me a whole lot around the importance of, as a leader, to the importance of encouraging people to not be afraid of asking questions, encouraging people to be curious and go beyond their own space, just to learn and observe different things. So I very fondly remember Mary Dowell. She was a wonderful manager and supervisor at the time, and she had a long, very, very good career at the Boeing company, did super innovative things there as well. So her personal approach, I think, just allowed me to be comfortable very early on in my career to express curiosity and just be open-minded to doing new things.
So it was really about curiosity through talking to people. Yeah.
And, young engineer, anxious to learn, anxious to obviously, figure out how to work in a brand new industry for me. And right out of college, everything was new, but also a very complicated company. The Boeing company is very, very complicated. And it's very easy in a company like that to kind of get put in a box. And if you don't have a supportive leadership environment, you can be stuck in that box for a while. But Mary was not at all like that. She saw my curiosity, she supported it and helped me open doors. And that allowed me to have a very, very open mindset on how I think about learning and frankly, taking a little bit of risk, being a little bit uncomfortable.
At Curiosity Based, we think of curiosity as a practice. And one of the three elements is relationship building. And through that back and forth, that's where we can learn a lot. So you talked about that being at Boeing and now at Snohomish County. Can you describe a bit of your IT team? How many people work in IT and what are the different functions? And what are just some of those surprising behind the scenes tidbits that you can share with our audience?
Yeah. So before I go into the specifics on the IT department, Snohomish County, you already mentioned this, third largest county in Washington state. We have about 840,000 residents. There's about 3,400 employees. Seasonally, a little bit more. If you think of parks and so on in the summer. And the Department of Information Technology, we have about 100 employees. We have 5 different service lines. We have, of course, a service desk and what we call business operations. So all of our sort of administrative functions and so on. So when people get stuck, they call it service desk and get assistance. We have a infrastructure team that handles all of our network and all of our application environment. All of our cybersecurity environment and so on. We have an application team as well. We call it our innovation team. They do everything from application development to application support. Government has a long list of very, very old and not so modern solutions, and that's part of our apps team's responsibility. We also have our data management team. That's a relatively new function in our area, addressing things around things that have to do with the vast amount of information we have and ensuring that we understand what it is and where it is, which involves privacy and also things like HIPAA. We use that as sort of the foundation for that department as the foundation for our AI strategy as well. And then finally, what we call the Office of the CIO, which is sort of the leadership function, if you will, within the county. So it's a pretty broad team, full service IT, everything that you can think of in the world of IT, from end user support to back end infrastructure and cybersecurity and the large data center in the basement and so on and so forth. So pretty diverse business.
And how has it changed that workforce over the past, say, 10 years?
Yeah, so I've been there for about almost 7 years now, actually. I'd say the biggest change for us is a couple of things. I think we've gotten a much more awareness and insight around the importance of information. And what I mean by that is the fact that information is power and information enables people to do their job. So our focus on and creating a data management division within our department is a part of that to help enable access to information and the proper storage and usage of information as well among our county employees. So that's something that has really become prominent in the last few years, and that ties into a lot of things around legislation around privacy, where we're going with AI and so on. And of course, the cloud is a very, very large influencer as we think about modernization of our legacy solutions and environments that we have. Thinking about cloud, moving to the cloud is obviously a very, very important part of what we do. So our cloud environment is relatively growing more so than it was 10 years ago for very obvious reasons. As you modernize, you don't necessarily go into an on-prem solution unless you really, really have to. So complexity is large. Government organizations there's a lot going on in the county. We have 25 different departments and 5 offices in addition to that, everything from law and justice to human services and a health department and public works and planning and development, and you can go down the list. But essentially all of the things that you don't necessarily think about as a resident that really make your county work and make the things that you do every day work without you thinking about it. So for me, the biggest change coming in was recognizing that there's a lot going on in government operations that I never thought about because it always just works. And now I can see it from the inside, which is super fascinating.
Yes, because you spent many years in the private sector and then going to the government sector. What has been the biggest change or surprise for you?
Well, pace, no doubt about it. Coming from Microsoft to a government organization, the pace is completely different. I will say, though, that we are stewards of taxpayer money. The pace, I have reflected on this a lot, actually. The idea of moving fast in government operations and making the wrong decision is not a good idea because, taxpayer money, we want to be very prudent and thoughtful about that. So we are enabled and allowed to kind of slow down our decision making, which allows us to make better decisions, in my opinion, because we know that when we make a decision, it's going to be with us for a long time. We can't change our mind. We can't turn the corner and go in a different direction like you could in the private sector. So even though it was a big change, I will say that is also, I think, a healthy thing for a government organization not to rush into things too much.
Taking the time to pause and to think deeply is actually one of the things that really allows for curiosity to foster and to grow. So, Viggo, could you give me an example of how curiosity is practiced in your industry, in your sector, and at Snohomish County?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I don't think I have a magic answer for that. But let me talk a little bit about how we encourage our employees to, we may not call it curiosity, but it really is. To your point, it's about taking time to do things that are different than what you do every day. So we focus a lot on ensuring that people that are wanting training, that they get access to training, whether that be going to a conference or taking a certification or just participating in some online classes and so on in the areas that you have passion around. And maybe even in areas that is completely outside of what you do, so that you can learn and understand more things. So a core principle is to ensure that we have access to training for our employees. Now, in addition to that, we have done one thing that is maybe unique in government. Our budget cycles are very fixed, and they're sort of we're on a biannual cycle for budgeting, which ties up your money and on those assigned programs and projects that you have asked for investments in. But we have carved out a portion of our budget into what we call an innovation fund, and that is purely there to think about how can we accelerate the ideas that come to the table after our budget is locked in, so that we can actually be more agile and we can actually be more innovative and be more thoughtful around not having everything go through a super long planning cycle. And that, I think, has been a really interesting exercise for us as well as for the county. The first year, people were like, I'm not sure what this is. I don't know what to do with it. But over the last couple of years, we have seen a very, very large growth in sort of things coming to the table that fall into that category of what we call innovation. And many of them are not necessarily about innovation. People sometimes think this is a way to get more money to do their standard thing. So we have to be very clear on the boundaries of this and make sure that we have a good open conversation with the business partners around what it means to have an innovation project versus just a regular thing that you do every day.
Could you give me an example of what would qualify as an innovation project? Maybe one of your favorite examples?
Our prosecuting attorney has done some very innovative work around the display of essentially law and justice data to make it more accessible to the public and to interested parties. So we helped fund a law and justice dashboard in funding it from this area, in addition to some other funding we came up with as well. So that's a very good example of something that is purely benefiting our residents and stakeholders and outsiders who are curious about crime data, if you will, for Snohomish County.
So that's actually not just available within the IT department, it's actually available to any department, because you said it's the prosecuting attorney who proposed that?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I don't think we've spent any of the money on internal IT things. It's all business facing, and hopefully in facing as well, because what we do is we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our residents, and what we do should be serving the community. So everything that we do, whether it be on the innovation side or in our regular programs, is about supporting and enabling our people that live, work, and play in Snohomish County, that the government services are easily accessible.
So with that example of the prosecuting attorney wanting to have this dashboard, does then the IT department say, okay, we're going to build this dashboard, or is that something that then gets contracted to an outside vendor?
It depends. So in this case, it was a partnership with Microsoft as well as City University of New York. So different funding from different places, and the IT portion of it we funded, and that was about resourcing on our side. In this case, we brought in an outside resource that had some skills that we didn't have on the team. And that's very common. The innovation projects will sometimes be on the boundary of what we might have knowledge and skills around. But sometimes it means just buying a solution that makes sense, off the shelf, if you will, and integrating it into our environment.
And so then does this innovation fund, is that under your department then, or is that a shared resource across the county leadership?
It is under the Department of IT. However, we promote it to the business partners. So, we have people coming from all departments looking to do certain things here. And, I think we have supported probably a dozen of the departments through the years with various solutions. And the key point of this is that they're typically shorter projects, something that doesn't require a year's worth of planning and so on. And that's part of the boundary we put on this, is to make sure that it's something we can deliver more quickly and sort of outside of our standard IT processes.
And so then how does the IT department feel about supporting this? I mean, is this something that's exciting for them, or how do they feel about that?
Well, it's great. It allows our team members to actually go and play in a sandbox they may not have been in before, and I think that gives them more knowledge, gives them more skills, allows them to build new engagements with our business partners. And so, yeah, it's been a really good thing for our department and for the county, in my view.
It reminds me of how I think it's Google that sets aside, 5 or 10% of their time to do things that are not necessarily related to the business, but then really innovative projects can come from having that space. And you said that you also allow for people to get training to pursue learning in things that are not directly related to their work. Can you give me an example of one that would feel far-fetched and yet it actually really it was something that the department supported?
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I mean, most things that we do in IT isn't super far-fetched per se, but lately we have ensured that especially our development team, that they have access not only to the right license to do innovation work within artificial intelligence, but also attend seminars or engage with our partners in the industry to learn and understand what the opportunities are here with artificial intelligence. So that's a pretty standard approach. And, IT is a fairly, I mean, we're sort of in a box, right? Things are pretty predictable, at least from where I sit. Things are pretty predictable on what an IT organization does. So we try to stay within that box and not get too crazy, because we do, at the end of the day, have a mission to fulfill. And that means that we just need to be mindful of that. But for us, it's really about encouraging our team members to go look at emerging technologies in particular, and also working with our industry partners and educational partners as well. So we do every year, for example, we do a capstone project with the University of Washington Industrial and Systems Engineering Department that has allowed us to get outside perspectives that frankly teach our team a little bit too, because the kids that are in college today think very differently around technology and the workplace than what we do with the folks that have been on my team for a long time. So really, the whole idea is to be very open to introducing different ways of thinking, different ways of operating, and exposing our team members to that, and not putting boundaries in place or obstacles in place of them being curious, if you will.
Right now, we are going through a lot of layoffs in the tech industry, and I know a lot of people are worried about losing their jobs because of AI. How are people in the public sector feeling about that? Because you said that they're learning about AI. Is this and this AI is going to take my job, or is it, this is going to actually help us get all the things we need to get done more efficiently?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and maybe a bit of a quicksand question as well. So I want to be thoughtful on the response, but clearly there's the use of artificial intelligence would change how we work. I think we all recognize that. But the approach that we take, and when we talk about it, is that, look, it's not about job replacement. It's about, for us, identifying the use cases that are difficult for our employees to do without a lot of manual work, as an example, allowing them to focus on higher order work. And there's tons of opportunities like that. So if we are thoughtful around how we communicate to our workforce, if we engage with our union partners to ensure that they don't feel threatened by the work we're doing on the technology side, AI is no different than any other technology introduction, frankly. It's just that it gets a lot of press right now for many different reasons. But clearly it is an opportunity for us to work smarter and solve problems that otherwise would take a long time for us to do, and frankly, to be more efficient. For us, it's less about job removal and more about ensuring that we focus on that more high value and allowing our employees to spend time on doing things that frankly are more value added and help our residents with whatever they might.
It makes me think about how that's one of the big differences of IT in the public sector versus in the private sector, because in the private sector, they are beholden to the shareholders, whereas in the public sector, you need to serve your community. And actually, if you can get better and faster at that, that just means you can do more of it. And that there's typically this belief that there's a lot more job stability in government. So, hey, this is going to actually help us versus, if this technology works so well, I might actually eliminate my position. So I'm just thinking about that. That's one of the big differences in the private versus public sector.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, Viggo, just moving on to the next question of, when is it difficult for you personally to practice curiosity at work?
Yeah, I mean, the standard answer is we're busy. And and
We're always
clearly
busy.
yeah, exactly. It's super easy to get caught up in your calendar and the things you do every day. So uh, if I sort of accept that and recognize that I can control my calendar and I can parking a lot of time to do things that's not what I do every day, if you will, I think that's one approach. But my personal approach to being curious has to be about an open mindset, about me, whether it be in personal interactions or whether it be in the things I do every day or the technology that I use or don't use, and being very open-minded to doing new things. It's so easy to keep doing exactly what you've done because it's comfortable. So to me, it's being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and taking a moment to sort of step out of your lane and do things that you maybe typically don't do. So going back to, why is that hard? Well, because at the risk of dating myself, I have been in the workplace for a long time, and you build habits. And I think the challenge comes down to my personal mindset around being curious and ensuring that I don't necessarily just get caught up in doing the same thing all the time.
Viggo, can you share a specific example of when it was difficult to practice curiosity because you were going to be super uncomfortable?
I'm going to go down the AI path a little bit. It can feel inauthentic to use AI if you're creating a work product. So I've always felt like I don't want to do that because it doesn't reflect my work, if you will. So I hesitated and sort of leaning in and starting more actively to use things like Microsoft Copilot that we use in our department, and specifically Copilot chat for in the Office suite. I had a situation where I was really far behind, and I had to get some things done, and it was in a me and some partners, some other CIOs in different counties and cities were building a presentation for a conference, and we were all behind. And then finally I said, look, let's just try this in Copilot, and so that we can get going and start the dialogue. And it was something that neither one of us really wanted to do because we had that sort of pride in, we've got to do this ourselves. What we learned though was that, you saved a ton of time by doing this. And we were able to cut out all of the minutia of creating a PowerPoint deck that would have been a lot of debate back and forth around verbiage and use of words and so on, versus looking at a product that came out of Copilot. Frankly, that was more beautiful than any PowerPoint that I could ever do on my own. But at the same time, it gave us all of the things we needed to, and then we could just adjust. So that importance of not just taking it and running, but also actually using it as a starting point. And it saved us a ton of time and actually led to dialogue around the topic that we were presenting on, not spending time on the mechanics of building a PowerPoint deck and finding the words and all that. So, and at the beginning of this, none of us were really comfortable taking this approach, but for me, it was a really big lesson, and it saved me a ton of time too. So
I appreciate you acknowledging that. I also had that same bump too in using AI. I'm using ChatGPT to help me with some of my writing because I take a lot of pride in my own writing. It's just, wait a minute, is this truly mine? But then I discovered what you discovered too. It's just, there's actually, it saves a lot of time, and it's still, that presentation was still your content.
Yeah.
So Viggo, I'd love to hear, what is sparking curiosity for you in your own life right now, outside of work?
Outside of work, it's a little bit kind of what I talked about before around doing things you don't normally do, but having hobbies. I think I look at a computer screen most of the day. A lot of people interactions, of course, but frankly, that's a lot of that is like what you and I are doing right now. Anyway, so I think finding, for me, doing things that it's more about using my hands or thinking differently. I took up coffee roasting a few years ago just to do something different, and it's not only has been a lot of fun because you can source beans from all sorts of different places that you can't get when you go to Starbucks or the grocery store, wherever you get your coffee beans from, and it's been a really, really cool exercise in sort of extending my awareness around different geographies, frankly. So I understand more about the world. I understand more about the sourcing of the beans from those places. And I don't source the beans. I buy them from people who buy them in those places. But it has sort of opened up my mind to the geography of the world in a very different way, through a product that I enjoy. And then, of course, you can tweak that and so on. So now I'm playing with the idea of how can I monetize this so I can pay for my habit, maybe. But certainly some coffee. Let me know, and I'll put you on my mailing list. You can be a future customer when I retire.
What would the name of the coffee brand be? Viggo's Coffee or something else?
I actually bought a URL for this because not that I may or may not ever do anything with it, but Garage Roastery is what I chose because it started in the garage, right? As many things. I got kicked out of the house the first time I did it because I created too much smoke. So it's ended up in the garage.
Well, that's so interesting. I never thought about roasting coffee at home. Viggo, how can people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is the default. I have a presence there as most other professionals do, and feel free to reach out if anybody has any questions or comments or feedback. I'd love to hear from you.
Viggo, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I appreciated our conversation about IT and the difference in the private and public sector and all of the ways that you can still have a lot of innovation and learning at the county level. Listeners, remember to practice curiosity at work. And if you need any help with that, please reach out to us at curiositybased.com.